What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and we're back today with the Game Week preview. It is back and it will be here for the rest of the season. Game Week 30 plus, of course, going through all your questions and topics that you put to me on Twitter. Quite a few to go through, as well as captaincy as normal. No beating around the bush. Let's just get into this one. So first up, we had El Stato ask, what's the optimal balance on the free hit in terms of double game week and single game week players? And I actually think, and I was kind of discussing on stream on Sunday about certain words I'm trying not to use, and balance is one that I do use, but actually, does it really matter? I'm not sure it does. Whether you have 7 or 8, 9 or 10, 12 if you're on bench boost double game week players, I don't think it really matters in case of balance. And I'll give you an example, right? I probably won't have Trent Alexander-Arnold on my free hit team. I could have him, but I probably won't. I'll probably risk not having him, but I think there's absolutely an argument made to have him instead of a double game week player potentially as well. So, I don't know, let's say I do go for my Tierney or Bellerin punt. I'm sure a lot of people would say, well, Trent Alexander-Arnold is just a better option. And suddenly I've got one less double game week player. It doesn't mean my team is more balanced necessarily. It just means that I've got a certain player that's only got a single game week instead of a player that's got a double game week. So I don't think balance really matters versus just getting the players that you want. Like, the more and more I look at doing a free hit draft or various drafts, whatever it might be, and I'm mostly doing free hit because that's what I'm on, right? I usually come around to having 9 double game week players as the max because it's just not any more that I want. And it's not really in terms of balancing, you know, one number versus another. Like, if I only liked 8, I would have 8. If I want to take a punt or 2, I might have 10 or 11. I'm not really worried about how many single game week players I have versus everyone else. It just depends on the quality. So for me, it's kind of Mason Mount versus an Ozil or something like that. And Doherty in defence versus having another Arsenal defender alongside Leno. So they're really the decisions I'm making. How many double game week players or single game week players I end up with, I don't think really matters. So same as all throughout the season, pick the players you think are going to score most. If that happens to be a single game week player and you only have 6 or 7 double game week players, everyone else has 9 or 10, it doesn't matter if you're confident that those single game week players are going to outscore. So I wouldn't worry too much about balance personally. FPL Arrows asked about kind of non-Aubameyang options, the likes of Nketiah, Saka. Are they options? Is Aubameyang a problem playing on the left? Which he may well do. They may play someone else down the centre. Lacazette can play there. Nketiah can play there. And we've seen Aubameyang play on the wings quite a few times. I'm not concerned about Aubameyang whatsoever. Like, I've seen some drafts, and we spoke about it on the Scoutcast over on Fantasy Football Scout, about maybe not putting Aubameyang in because he is 11.1 million. We'll come on to captaincy later, but I don't think many people are going to captain him. So he's a lot of your budget. But for me, he's about the only nailed-on attacker in that Arsenal side. He's so consistent. And I don't have the stats to hand, but I did an article earlier in the season looking at Aubameyang's scores, both as a centre-forward, in terms of just pure goals, not really FPL points, but looking at his kind of conversion rates from the wing and from centre-forward. And it was just as good on the wing as centre-forward. In fact, at the time of writing it, because it was a small sample size for the wing, the amount of goals he scored in the games where he played on the wing was actually a higher percentage than centre-forward. Not saying it's a better position for him, it was a smaller sample size, but it just showed me that I shouldn't really worry regardless of which kind of position he's playing. If he's playing, he will score goals, 17 already this season. I'm sure he's going to get a few more before the end of the season. In terms of other options, I've seen Arteta talking about Nketiah, I've seen him talking about Saka, kind of bigging them up a little bit. There are so many, so much competition for those places up front. So you've got Pepe, Lacazette, Nketiah, Martinelli can play there. Saka's played left back, but he can play further forward as well. So it's really difficult to know which ones are definitely going to start. And I don't think anyone really can tell you that. So outside of that, it's kind of a punt. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad option, especially if you're on like a bench boost. Risking a 4.4 million player, like 4.4 for kind of Saka or Nketiah, is that much worse than going for a Cantwell or a Duda at Norwich for 4.7 million? I don't think so. I think if it was me and I had a spare Arsenal slot, I would take the risk that they're going to get one start plus more minutes. On a free hit, I'm less likely to go for them unless you really need the money to enable something elsewhere. But from all the free hit sides I've put kind of into my drafts and stuff, I haven't really found that problem. So for me, Nketiah or Saka, whichever one you want to go for, whether it's in the midfield or a striker, I think they're good options on a bench boost because I think you might get a game plus a few minutes in the other game. At the very least, 2 sub appearances you'd hope for. So yeah, I think they can be quite good options. I don't really have a strong opinion on which one's better. I mean, Saka seems to have been played at left back and done a good job, and he has been pushed forward as well in pre-season, so it could be decent. But yeah, I think whichever one you go for is a bit of a punt, but they're there if you need the money, especially on a bench boost. I think that could be decent. Jamie Vardy. So Abdul Al-Sadi asked me about him and said, is he still a valuable asset? And to be honest, I don't really see why he wouldn't be. He's been so good all season. He's 9.7 million, which is quite expensive when you look at some of the cheaper options that have performed well. But at times this year, he's been super, great value, to be honest, for 9.7 million. He's been consistent, scored plenty of goals. I don't really see why that would stop going forward for the rest of the season. And one thing which I've kind of touched on with him in previous videos and streams so far since we've been back, since FPL has been reopened, is he is 33 years old now. That's not particularly young, not in terms of football, in terms at least. And a big part of his game is pace as well. Now, you're going to lose that pace as you get older. I'm not saying he has yet, but also the ability to recover quickly also goes when you get a bit older. Now, don't get me wrong, he plays week in, week out, and it doesn't really, or hasn't really been much of a problem, but an enforced break of kind of 3 months for a player that's 33 years old is probably as good a time as any to have it. So I actually think it could benefit him quite a bit. And I also think the fixtures are not that bad opening up. So Watford away, Brighton at home, Everton away and Palace at home. And I guess a lot of people probably won't have him for this week, but onwards, if you look at the next 3 afterwards then, Brighton and Palace at home in the next 3, I think he could be a good option. For me, the problem has been, it's been very difficult to fit him in. There's no way I could afford that price on my free hit team, not when I want to get kind of Sterling, De Bruyne and Aguero. So it's hard to fit him in. And after that, the way my team is set up, I've got 3 very cheap strikers, and you can get Jimenez for only 8.1 million. Rashford's back fit now, 8.8 million. So there's a little bit more of a competition for his kind of place in our FPL sides. But I do think he could be a valuable asset if you're willing to spend 9.7 million. I still think probably on his day, after you forget about kind of double game weeks, could he rival the likes of Aguero and Aubameyang for a cheaper price? I think he still probably could, to be honest. And then last bit for this one, double Wolves defence. Bilal asked me about this on Twitter. From a value perspective, basically, I think double Wolves defence could be decent. The rest of the fixtures they have, not just the opening 3, which we all know are good, their fixtures pretty much for the rest of the season are decent. And the thing I like about them is they have some very good value options in defence. So Doherty, I've got on screen, is 6.3 million. But they have Sice 4.6 million, Bolly 4.8 million. You'll have heard about me talk about them before. And I do think once Bolly's in the team, 7 clean sheets in 13, I think there's a good chance he can not maybe match that, but get kind of close to that, making it worthwhile to have those players. And at 4.8, 4.6 million, if you want to go the cheaper route, you can bench them. You don't have to play them every week. Matt Doherty's a bit different, but he does add a bit of attacking threat too, which Sice has as well. So I actually think it's okay. When I think about the defenders, right now, everything could change by game week 31, don't get me wrong. But when I think about defenders, who am I going to want? Maybe a Liverpool defender, maybe 2. I've got a Man United defender. Man City, if I think any of them are nailed on, looking fit and kind of available to play every single game. Outside of that, Newcastle defenders, but they're cheap too, similar price to Wolves. I might actually probably more likely to go for the Wolves defender as well, especially having Sice and Doherty, just adding that attacking threat as well. So I think a double up is viable. I'm not sure about in Game Week 30 if you're free hitting or using your unlimited transfers just to wild card them out next week. But if you're not doing that, and especially if you need to make a balanced side for this week and going forward, I think double defence is good. Even if it's Bolly and Sice, I think that's decent. And like I said, they can be benched if needed. So yeah, don't think that doubling up on defence is ever bad. And the Wolves one, especially with Bolly on the side, has been very good. And the fixtures are decent for the rest of the season. So we continue talking about defences. Triple Sheffield United defence. Is it good for this week only, says DB Danny. So I've literally got no issues with triple defence at all. I think they've been good for the season. They've got really good fixtures in the double game week. I don't really have a great reason why you shouldn't triple up. I'm probably going to double up because, at the end of the day, it isn't all eggs in one basket kind of approach. If you get 2 clean sheets, you're absolutely laughing. That is such good value. They're such cheap players. Potential for attack and returns as well. You could even go for Lundstram as one of those 3. So no problems with it at all. And like I said, if they do get those couple of clean sheets, that could be decent. From a pure non-logical point of view, and I've said this before along similar kind of circumstances, it's all well and good tripling up, but a lot of FPL managers cannot cope when things go bad. And imagine you're watching the first game back of the season, so the first game back since everything kind of shut off, and it's Sheffield United is the first game. Imagine you're watching that and after 2 minutes they concede and you've lost your triple clean sheet. I'm not saying that will happen, and I'm not saying that's even a bad thing. They could go on and get attack and returns that game. They could get a clean sheet in the next game, still making them great value. But a lot of managers will not be able to take that. So I'd really think about that, what your reaction is going to be like. Are you then going to want to raise transfer players and all this stuff? You don't want that to happen. And also, one thing that I noticed, which I wrote in an article for Scout yesterday, Dean Henderson has saved, I think it's 4.4 expected goals for Sheffield United. And that's the most for any goalkeeper in the league. So what that essentially means, as long as I've got this right, which I'm pretty sure I have, is he has kind of stopped. So the amount of quality chances that have been taken against Sheffield United, he has stopped the most, which on one side is really good. It means he's stopping those good quality chances, which you'd expect players to score from usually. He's a really good goalkeeper. It looks like he's going to sign the deal to stay on until the end of the season on loan from Man United. And that's really good. On the other hand, you could look at it from a point of view, well, you can't keep giving teams these good quality chances to score goals from because they will put them away. And that could happen in the double game week. The only, obviously, advantage for Sheffield United is they are playing Villa and Newcastle, not necessarily the best attacks. I think Aston Villa are okay. Newcastle, I don't know, maybe this break will do them good, but they have been awful all year in terms of attack. Like, their attackers have scored hardly any goals. Joe Linton, St. Maximin has done okay since he's come in. Almiron, they've not been exactly prolific. So that's obviously going to help, but Dean Henderson has had to bail them out quite a few times. But if you're talking about this week only, which you are, that was how the question was posed to me, then yeah, I think it's absolutely fine. I probably won't be doing it. I want to just go for the double up and maybe go for a slightly different option. But absolutely no problems with it at all. Fernandes or Rashford. This was actually asked by Bilal as well, who asked the Wolves question. Now, I can't remember if it was this week only or not. So for Game Week 30, I think really you could go for any Man United player. Who knows who's going to be the best? Martial up front. Fernandes, the guy that was doing the business before it ended. Pogba, massive differential. Rashford just come back from an injury. And let's just say, like, quickly, FPL aside, Rashford is doing great things, like using his kind of reach from like social media accounts and stuff to really try and put pressure on the government, and for a good cause from everything I've seen. So fair play to Rashford. That actually makes me kind of want him a little bit more than maybe I had before. But I think as a 1 week punt, I think you could go for any. If I was punting on one this week, I probably would lean towards Rashford or Martial, just hopefully get those goals. Like, Fernandes can score as well, and he's on penalties as well, which helps. But I feel like a lot of his points will come from assists, which isn't necessarily bad, very consistent. But for a 1 week punt, maybe go for that explosiveness. Long term, I still think Fernandes is the man. After that, it depends whether it's a midfield or a striker slot, depending on whether you go for Rashford or Fernandes for me. Is bench boost a waste this week? So Creamy Pints on Twitter asked this. Mainly because he says no one will. You don't know who's going to start. Basically, he says there's a chance that your bench comes into play anyway. Now, I don't strictly agree with that. I do think there's potentially an argument to be made to not bench boost this week, depending on your chip setup, which I'm not going to get into in this one. But yeah, I get what you're saying. If anything, though, especially if you're going for a lot of double game week players, which most people will, kind of 9, 10, 11, 12, however many it might be. I think, yes, you run the risk that some of those double game week players don't play twice, but you've got to expect that they're probably going to play at least once. And then the single game week players that you'll have as well, they've just had a really long break. Yes, we can't say 100% who's going to start, but how many teams are going to completely change their lineup? You know that probably Duda or Cantwell from Norwich are maybe going to, or probably going to start, I would say. You know, the likes of maybe Mount at Chelsea, Harry Maguire at Man United if you want to defend. I'm just kind of thinking of players off the top of my head. Saiss and Bolly, Doherty as single game week players, Jimenez, they're all probably going to start. So actually it's probably a good idea to use the bench boost from that perspective, because you'll get at least one game out of all those players, potentially more. And using it later in the season, I do think there's some pros for doing it, but obviously one of the cons is then they've played more games at that point, so the players might need a bit more of a rest. So it's hard to say. So I know what you mean about potential for players to come off the bench, but I just think the 5 subs rule is going to let players or let managers rotate a bit more. And I don't think bench boost is a waste this week. I don't think you can look at it from that view, to be honest. I don't anyway. And then last one, risking Norwich players because of obviously positive tests they've had. FPL Renarid asked this. I wouldn't worry about this. Like, the Norwich player is not going to be the forefront of your team anyway. You don't know who it is. And we're probably going to see this a few times along the line. So unless it comes out, I think you just use or do your team as normal. Like, if you were captain and Norwich player, maybe I'd probably rethink. But the games aren't going to get called off, just for a single player. We already know that. So I wouldn't be worrying about that at all, to be honest. I would still have a Norwich midfielder, maybe Cantwell or Duda, on my bench. If I had Pookie up front, like, I'd probably still go for him, but I just think because there's other good options for that kind of price, like, well, I know Jimenez is a little bit more expensive, but you could go for Jota, who've got a really good fixture as well. I'd maybe switch that out, but again, they're not going to be the forefront of where your points come from this week. So for me, I probably wouldn't worry too much about that, to be honest. So keep an eye out for it. If we get any more news about who the player is and stuff like that, then obviously, yes, then you can make decisions, especially if it's a player you might own, but also a player that might affect how the team perform. For Norwich, that might not matter so much, but, you know, if Man United lost Fernandes, for example, that would probably affect the whole team. So that's the kind of news we need to keep a lookout for. We might get a bit more before the deadline, but it's going to be really important, basically, to keep up to date on the latest news. And last up, we've got Captaincy. And you know, if you've watched these videos for a while, you know what I'm going to say. It's a double game week. There's no way I can captain a single game week option. I do think there's some players with some good fixtures. Chelsea and Wolves stand out to me. West Ham and playing Aston Villa. But I'm not sure any of those players are worth captaining for me ahead of a double game week player at all. Liverpool could do really well, don't get me wrong. And Trent Alexander-Arnold is a player that I worry about not owning a little bit. But Salah or Mane are not going to be heavily captained for me. And I just, you know, yes, they could get a big score, but I'd really back the teams with a double game week to do even better. So let's look at the options. For double game week, I think it has to be Man City. We'll come on to them at the end. Arsenal, the only real option is Aubameyang. I think he's the only attacker that's kind of nailed on to probably play twice, and none of the defenders are obviously worth captaining. The problem with Aubameyang for me, or the concern I suppose, is he plays Man City, and that will be a tough game. I'm not saying he won't score and can't score, but you wouldn't imagine a big score there. And then Brighton game, again, might not be a huge score. I do think he can be consistent enough to maybe get 2 goals over this period, which would still be a good result in a double game week, and maybe a couple of bonus points to go with that. But I'm not sure I see much explosiveness there from him in this particular game week. So for me, Aubameyang, I'd probably discount him because of that. In terms of kind of Sheffield United, look, I think I've talked about their defence already in this video. I won't go through that huge amount more. But their defenders, if you take Lundstram out of the equation, their defenders have 1 double-digit haul between them for the whole season. So in terms of explosiveness, it's just not there. And I just think that double or triple defence, whether you go for that, then kind of whatever. But in terms of captain, I just think that's a kind of a step too far for a team that, yes, have been very good, but they, like any defence, could lose the clean sheet. So I wouldn't be captaining any of the defenders. If Lundstram was nailed on still, if Sander Berg hadn't come and I knew Lundstram was going to start twice, I think you could absolutely make a chance or make a kind of case for captaincy, because there is a chance they will keep 1 or 2 clean sheets, and he's arguably one of their best attackers as well. The problem is we don't know if he's going to start twice. So I kind of have to discount Sheffield United players. I know some people, me, are looking at McBurney. Some more people are looking at the likes of Fleck. I just don't think they're a kind of explosive enough or going to score enough points to warrant captaincy. In terms of Aston Villa, let's not even entertain the defence there. Let's be honest, the only option is Grealish. And while I think he's good value, again, 3 double-digit hauls this year, 10, 10 and 13. Obviously, if you got a couple of them, that'd be a massive score and it'd be a great captaincy option. But again, not for me, because I just think Man City players are more likely to do the business. So let's talk about them. De Bruyne, I think, is probably the obvious pick. I think when I say obvious, I think what I mean is he's the one that most people are going to pick. He's been so consistent all season. I think if there's a chance that any player kind of plays twice in that Man City team, it probably will be Kevin De Bruyne. So I would definitely look at him. His points per match is great this year. And, you know, everyone's going to have him in his team. For the small sample size of teams I looked at, the 30 teams I mentioned before, he was in 100% of teams. So I think he has to be there. The second favourite option for me is Aguero. Now, I looked at the per 90 stat on Fantasy Football Scout, and per 90 minutes this season, he has scored 0.99 goals. Now, quick explanation, that doesn't mean he scored 0.99 goals per game. It means for every 90, and maybe this is a bit obvious, but for every 90 minutes he plays, whether that's kind of like 40 minutes in one match, 50 in another, he's pretty much scoring a goal per 90 minutes, which is incredible. Now, obviously, you have to take that kind of stat with context. The context is he isn't a 90-minute per game man, right? So he's not going to probably get 90 minutes twice, almost certainly not going to get 90 minutes twice. But when he does play, he is scoring really well. His expected goal involvement is more than 1 for every 90 minutes. So if he gets one game, plus either minutes in the other game, or he gets 2 starts with kind of his minutes managed a little bit, I feel like I'm definitely backing him for returns. On his day, he's so explosive. We've seen that so many times before. He scored the same amount of goals as Salah in 800 less minutes. He's the one that I really want to captain. I am kind of slowly talking myself into doing it. But in terms of 2 starts, someone who's extremely creative, Kevin De Bruyne is probably the one. I think after that, you're kind of punting a little bit. Sterling would be my next favourite because I think on his day, he's very explosive as well. It's kind of what you want from a captain in a double game week. But will he start twice? And then Mahrez, Sané, they're even, for me, they're even punts to have in your team, let alone captain. So captaincy decision for me, very, very easy this week. It has to be Man City player. I am between Aguero and De Bruyne. If you haven't got Aguero and you've got De Bruyne plus other Man City players, and I think it just defaults straight to De Bruyne. You can make an argument for Aubameyang. Don't get me wrong, he's been very consistent. I just don't see him getting as big a return as the City boys in this. And I know some people saying like Man City not got anything to play for because obviously the league's gone. Liverpool are going to win that. But top 4 is not mathematically certain. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Pep Guardiola knows they're going to get top 4. Like the other teams are not going to overtake them, but it's not absolutely certain. So they have to make sure of that. And they've still got Champions League football to play. And they've got a decent chance of winning it this year, given the teams that are left in. Not saying, the Real Madrid match is easy by any stretch, but they have got a good chance. And they're not just going to rest these players for the rest of the season and then play Champions League football. They're going to have to keep playing to kind of keep that rhythm up. We've seen that talked about before. So I'm definitely going Man City, no doubt about it. That is my reasons why. If I'm feeling very brave, I'm just going to go for Aguero. I don't even know if it's a brave pick, to be honest. In some ways, I think it's a sensible pick because he is just so explosive on his day. But I expect the one that most people will go for is Kevin De Bruyne, and to be fair, for very good reason. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Enjoy the start of the season. It's finally here. Lots of videos been made. I hope you've enjoyed them during this kind of mini pre-season. Obviously going on from next week, I'll have all this usual content again. Team selections, game week previews, streams and all that stuff. So make sure you subscribe if you're new around here. If you've enjoyed this video, click like. If you'd want to consider supporting the channel even further, there is a Patreon link in the description as well. Otherwise, I will catch you soon for another video. Good luck in Game Week 30 plus, and I'll catch you again soon. Cheers all.